Do you remember your like I made it moment or like welcome to the show moment when it first hit you after grinding as an intern up to the
Oh,
show
our opening day national anthem was freaking goosebumps.
on the field?
Yeah, because we got like all the staff members got called out, all the roster, all the lineup, everybody got called out to the line for the national anthem. And it was the first time I put my hand on my chest. I can literally feel my heart beating through my shirt. I'm like, wow, this is ridiculous.
Zach Redding, welcome to the Matt Tometz Performance Podcast, the minor league S&C coordinator for the Houston Astros, going on year 7 with the org. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining and tell me something good that's going on in your life.
Oh, well, I appreciate thank you for having me. It's good going on. We got spring training around the corner and getting the guys ready and starting another year for the 2025 campaign. So excited to get going with the boys.
Heck yeah. So I guess we were recording before this, but I won't out what's in his spam email inbox. We'll leave that up for the listener. I always like making it exclusive, like we talked before this, get some FOMO in the listener. But so going on year 7, so he has spent time as currently the minor league S&C coordinator, as an assistant MLB strength coach. So he made it to the show. Triple A, high A, low A, and also as an intern starting out with the organization. So first, just impressive making that long in this field anywhere with one org. But what happened in Double A? Did you just have something against those guys or what?
No, well, the travel in Dublin is pretty rough, so I'm not too disappointed that I missed it. But actually, what had happened was I was slotted to go to Double A in 23, I believe, or 22, and then a position opened up in Triple A, and then I kind of backfilled into that, and that's how I got there in 23, 24 to follow. But yeah, that's how that kind of happened.
So almost literally every spot that you can have an S&C in an organization. And the connection here was Denton, who was the guest on episode 185. You guys crossed paths at your low A stop.
No way, yes.
Low A, yep, in Iowa. So you spent time also as a GA at Wichita State, played at Texas Tech and Wichita State. Someone hit
Mhm.
308 above 300 in college with 3 pumps. Might I also
Don't
add? I'm sure those felt.
look at the junior year stats. Let's look at that one.
Got to give you a shout out because that counts to having done it yourself for sure. So definitely want to pump you up. If there's a S&C, home run derby, I'm sure I'd probably put some money on you. So that's a little bit about where you've been, where you are, but now we will get into it. So first question brought to you by 1080 Motion. They're here to make speed happen. Again, really good people at that company, really good tech. I've known them for like 5 years or so. So cool that they are now an official sponsor. But my classic question, just to get this going, what is the coolest slash craziest story that you have so far? So just looking back at being in a major league org for 7+ years, like you couldn't even make up if you tried.
Well, I mean, I feel like the easy cop out answer was being part of the World Series run in 2024. Sorry, 2022. But it was honestly an experience like none other. I wasn't obviously part of the big league team at that year, just because I was in AAA. But still having, players like in playoffs, we were working with a taxi squad, so players that were on the reserves more or less. We were traveling with the players during the playoffs, working at the same schedule with everybody else on the roster, and being a part of that was a huge and gigantic experience. Growing up, loving baseball, playing baseball, and then being at the top level, succeeding at the top level, and being a part of it was just an incredible experience, and one that I'll never forget. Holding the trophy and being in the champagne showers and all that stuff. But that was definitely by far one of the craziest, emotion-packed, just crazy experiences to be a part of, and I was very blessed to be able to be part of it.
What is the vibe when the top level team wins it all? Are you like, do you feel like you're there or are you like disconnected enough where it's like, oh, cool, good for them, but like I didn't personally help? Like how is that transfer down?
It definitely is a little bit of uh like you kind of don't feel like you've earned it a little bit, like especially for me because like obviously I wasn't playing. Secondly, I wasn't a coach for that level. I worked with players that made impact at that level, which was very rewarding. But you do feel kind of like imposterish, kind of being at the side. Um, but you feel very supported, like you're supporting all the players, and like that's your role more or less is just to help them get to this goal. And it's a success for you because you've definitely had an impact on the day to day for players to be able to perform because of their resilience, because of their performance. So you got to kind of pat yourself on the back at some point, but it is kind of hard to take it in as others do because they're the ones that do all the demanding on field work and put the performance in under the high stress environments. But no, definitely looking back on it, like it was hard to compare to anything else I've been a part of, which was great. But yeah.
Did they have all the support staff and the people from the orgs? Were they at the? Did they bring you out to like the games and stuff, or were you watching from home?
No, I was in the clubhouse.
Oh,
I was on the field during the celebration. I was like as soon as the last out was made, I ran out from the weight room into the locker room, into
geez.
the dugout, onto the field. So I mean, they were like the Astros were very great in allowing us to have as much, full access to everything, and especially as part of the like the celebrations and things like that. So very blessed to be able to be in that environment as it was going on. And then again, you're working with like a small half roster of taxi squad players that you're pretty much like in it with them for the duration of the playoffs. So you kind of have like a second bit of a like camaraderie with them because we've kind of been in it together. But no, we were very very much in close with all the celebration and the champagne in general.
I'll have to look up last out of the 2022 World Series and try to find the big buff dude just like running around freaking out. Very, very cool. So that was our first question, again, brought to you by 1080 Motion. 1080 Sprint is their biggest tech, but here to make speed happen. So next, which I've kind of alluded to kind of in your background and stuff, but 7 years with any org is a long time, and kind of working it from literally an intern to the
Mhm.
show, and now more of like a manager, director kind of role. Um, how does how how have you reflected on growing deep in one area or one org versus like if someone over 7 years, say let's had um, like three different stops, like 2 years per stop instead of one stop for seven, kind of going deep in one place, how does that affect your development? Samson Equipment has elite strength training equipment and professional weight room solutions that'll get you in the door, but they have the people, the customer service, and the processes that'll keep you there. They've been doing so since 1976, and not only will their equipment completely transform and elevate your training, but they have the people that'll make the process as easy and enjoyable as possible. I can't speak high enough of them as a company from the top down, so please reach out to me directly for their contact information or visit Samson Equipment, that's SAMSON equipment.com to learn more. Fit is an online programming software that helps you train more athletes in less time with greater individualization. For in-person or remote training, Fit does so with a streamlined programming process, decision-making trees to help you integrate data into your programming, as well as better communication with all pieces of a high-performance model involved to break down silos. Learn more at fit.io, that's fytt.io, and tell them that Matt Tometz sent you.
Yeah, I think the most beneficial impact of being in one location is understanding the PD side. So like the hitting coaches, the pitching coaches, the fielding coaches, you end up getting a better knowledge of what their development plan and process is for improving player performance in their respective discipline. Um, so that kind of helps us better connect the dots. The more we can start speaking the same language and understanding the kinematics of the swing or the throw or like the pitch in general. And then having those same individuals kind of be with me as part of my process and their development as well. So we often have those collaboration periods where it's like, hey, this person is struggling to do this. Like, what could that possibly be due to, or why is he not being able to do that? So it breaks down a little bit more of like the biomechanics, the kinematics, and then some kinetics as well. If we look at some force plate numbers or things like that, so we can really kind of helps hone in on identifying specific, I guess, more or less baseball specific deficiencies that might be causing their lack of performance or limitation in performance. So it kind of helps you draw a better picture as to where training should be directed and almost help you reverse engineer the needs of the sport a bit more. Just from being around one sport and being a single org, you kind of have these similar messages expressed, but then you can kind of identify or get more clarity as to what those confines are and then how we can better impact them from the strength and conditioning department to make those transitions and those improvements more specific to on-field performance.
Do you remember, or is there anything that you do now as a S&C coach that has been influenced from those moments, whether it was a chalk talk after practice just with a pitching coach or hitting coach, or you were just like watching a pen and then they said something and then you just got like a light bulb about something to do in the weight room differently. So any examples of like having that relationship and being able to speak that language and being there, which I think is a big piece. Um, that had a direct, like I could see the difference in your weight room stuff because of that.
Yeah, so we actually a few pitching coaches, we've had a few coordinators in the past. Well, I guess we're both pitching coordinators. We work pretty extensively with pitching because it's a little bit more non-reactive component, so it's a little bit easier to have more dramatic impact because there's no implement they're reacting to. But like, there's two pitching coordinators I worked with in the past. One where we really did like dove deep into our programming as like a strength conditioning program and working more into like a dynamic correspondence programming regime, and then understanding, okay, obviously if we have the minimum amount of force that we need to have to express, how can we apply this force in more vector specific areas for how it can relate to pitching, and then kind of do like that Bondarchuk type method of training, and more of that specific to non-specific training adaptation and focus. And then others was more or less that we talked about just trying to find the range of motions that people might be lacking. And we've done, one of my favorite things that we've done was we use like a 3D strap to try to help potentiate movement patterns or activate movement patterns prior to pitching. And so then how that's been like a pitching coach to S&C coach collaboration before instilling it, then creating something that's ended up being kind of rolled out to the org as like, hey, we should do this prior to throwing, so that we can pattern their hinge, we can pattern their pelvic load and things like that prior to their activity, which to me was really cool to see that kind of play out, and then have like a dramatic impact on the sports side of it as well, um, as almost auxiliary to obviously everything that we do in the training outside of things, which is, also obviously very important. But this having more like on-field ties and correlations to performance from the skill side of things is just pretty cool to be a part of when it comes to like the daily integration and stuff like that.
Mhm. I'm sure that the players appreciate that as well, whether you're simply just like pull up a chair and you're just watching them hit BP in the cage or something kind of like that, or if you have to hop in and show them how it's done, either way. Um, but then being able to just like connect the dots for them in the actual weight room itself,
Mhm.
and say, hey, when your coach is talking about like your tilt or your hinge or whatever, like this is the drill that's getting your hips open so you can kind of do those things.
Yeah, exactly. I know and the thing that sucks is like a lot of times I try to use like these, I think about it with my mouth and I speak in these like flexion, extension, and all these terms that don't mean anything to the players. But like to me, I gotta like revert it back to like, yeah, well, you can't feel that unless you do this. And so like it's fun for me because I get to kind of connect the dots in real time with the players as they're telling me things that they don't necessarily feel or have struggles trying to get into these positions. And then for me, I'm like kind of reverse engineering, like we said. It's like, oh, we can do this to do this, and then that to do that, and then see if it kind of pans out and has a dramatic impact. And then if it does good, and then we can keep that in our back pocket and make sure we can use that again if we need to. But it's fun when players can be part of the process and they give insight as to things like they're trying to feel in the cage, and then replicate that with movements and patterns that they do in the weight room. It kind of just helps come full circle and uh, make things kind of all inclusive in the development process.
If there's anything I definitely believe getting into my old age here, my quarter life crisis that hasn't ended yet for some reason, is everything literally is its own language.
Mhm.
And whether it's just like the slang or as I've spent time in like beach volleyball, swimming, just other sports besides baseball, um, or like just how I talk about the 1080 sprint, like I'm sure some other person just saying like F0, P max, RF max, DRF. It's just like what is happening, and I just say it like it's English. Um, but being able to literally like I'm sure there's been times where like the player's been describing something and they're just like, what are you saying? You know? So is there any baseball specific phrase, like a cue of a pitching coach or hitting coach that like you find yourself saying in the weight room a lot?
Yeah, like for pitchers, I mean, think about like their lead leg block,
Yeah,
which
yeah. Oh,
like probably
that's a
three
good
or
one.
4 years ago, I was like, I don't know what that is. And then like obviously you start talking and understanding it more. Lead leg block, and then oh, what else? I know that was a big one. So I always
Yeah.
toss like, you mean like extension? Like what do you mean lead leg block?
Yeah.
But then like obviously kind of makes sense. And then like it's funny because even like between pitching and hitting, there's differences in like the reference to like their lead leg and their post leg. So like lead leg for hitters is like the leg striding towards the pitcher, and then that's like the plant leg for the pitcher striding
Mm.
towards the hitter. and the rear leg is the back leg for the hitter, then it's the post leg for the pitcher. It's like, all right, this is in a glossary just to have conversations with these different players. But no, it's funny.
You're telling me that that pitchers don't know what knee extension angular velocity is?
They
Come on.
really should read a book.
They haven't gone to school for 6+ years for this stuff? Come on.
Yeah, they're watching my Instagram though. They might get caught up here pretty soon.
Good, good, good. Perfect. Um, all right, so just the chance to dive in, and that's when the true collaboration happens, when you can build buy-in from the players, the coaches, but also like the unity from the top down of an org and then working your way up and kind of all those things that, when you're just hitting reset button, it's like when I spent time on the private side, like I would have a new client like every week, and just like restarting that process of like, all right, when I say this is what I mean, and these are our drills, and this is the flow, and I'm sure just not having to hit reset all the time was nice.
Oh yeah.
Um, so next, I guess now that you're in a role kind of like you are now, ISOFIT is not just pioneering isometric strength training, but they are opening up a brand new world of possibilities with health and performance benefits through isometric training and their own groundbreaking product. With patented force matching technology, they're reshaping the boundaries of functional health and human performance. Discover the future of health, fitness, and sports performance at isofit.com. That's ISOPHIT.com, and tell them that Matt Tometz sent you. What is the key to good cross-department communication besides simply just like check we met weekly, check we did our monthly meeting, so like what's the key to making that happen, whether it's within one team itself or from an org kind of top down?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is understanding the objectives and then also I guess, everyone else's point of view. So, like the different people impacted or impacting the situation, what's their point of view of how they can affect change, and then what their objectives are, and also understanding what like their KPIs for success would be. So that could be different from like an athletic trainer, a PT, a strength and conditioning coach, a infield coach. So like to me, it's almost as if we can understand and collaborate to understand what achievement would look like for whatever that goal is. And then like each department kind of giving their input as to, hey, like we need to get this done. And then like obviously there might be different insights, or there might be different methodologies to get to that achievement or to reach that goal. But then that's kind of like when that collaboration and like that communication and possibly even disagreement takes place, which is good. A disagreement to me is good. Um, just so that way, like you can say, okay, well, this is why this is important, but I don't see why this is important. It's like then everyone gets to have like that insight. It's an explanation as to why these things matter to them, not only from them as an individual, but like their methodology and their philosophies in general. Um, which to me is insightful because then you kind of get more understanding of that practitioner or that coach as to why they do certain things. But then you can also meet them on the ground and meet them where they're at with what their target is. And then as soon as everyone kind of understands what those target points are from each different facet, then we could possibly start helping each other pull in the right direction from different sides, even though we have different end goals in mind. Uh, but I think that's a big proponent is that not assuming everyone has the same process, but like obviously the goal of like say it's a return to play, everyone's goal is to get them back to returning to play uh, at this point in time. But like understanding like for me, if it's like a hamstring injury, making sure like their eccentric hamstring strength is up, their high speed running threshold ring capacity is at a certain point, and then also like ATs might have asymptomatic through pain range of motion. Obviously, all those things play into it, but just kind of understand how those things might affect the timeline of like my timeline, then how we can kind of combine those timelines onto a single, I guess, chronological roadmap.
Yeah, it's interesting when you hit that point where it's everyone has their own like lens and pair of glasses, or kind of how you phrase it, like how does each person define success for this like question or objective? And I forgot when I had this light bulb, but it's like if someone comes to you with the problem, like their default why it's a problem is like their lens. So if we go like return to play hamstring, then the strength coach is like workload was too high. And the biomechanist is like, oh, their form is bad. And then the hitting coach is gonna say, oh, well, we did too much like base running. It's like those aren't wrong. That's just like it's just like if a dude has a hammer and a screwdriver and something else, like they're all gonna. So I think
Mm-hmm.
being able to like kind of take a step back, um, take a step back and say like what pair of glasses are they looking at this through? And admittedly myself, like when I'm talking through a solo podcast and I'm just ranting for 45 minutes, right? Or if I'm like answering questions in an interview or talking with the young coach, it's like, yes, like I have a speed and sprinting background, so I view strength work as how do we get faster,
Mhm.
right? Versus someone who might have more of like a powerlifting background. It's just like we just all have different glasses. But I guess
Yeah.
um, the next thing I want to ask you about on this, I heard this. It's like if it can be a Zoom, make it an email. If it can be an email, like it probably could be a text.
Mhm.
So kind of as your 7 years in an org, what evolutions have you seen in like how they meet, how they share information? Has it gone from simply meeting to like they will email you the actual objective? So like what changes have made in this like cross-department communication style that you've enjoyed over the last few years, if any?
I definitely appreciate like actually being in the same room. Um, like obviously Teams meetings and Zoom meetings are great. Like it's if like obviously with our affiliates being in different locations and coaches being in different locations and stakeholders being in different locations, everyone that needs to be on these calls won't be in the same room. So I understand like it's obviously relevant and important to have those style of meetings so that way like information can be shared. But from like the people that are probably hands-on and more interacting with the player, having like an actual meeting in person um, goes miles beyond what I think you can do on like a phone call or a text. Just because if it's a new acute injury or you're working with like a new problem for like a mechanical change, a lot of times you end up like spitballing different ideas of like ways you can make this or solve this issue or this problem. And it comes with trial and error. Like obviously, before you get interacting with the player, there's more trial and error beforehand. Even if it's like with a new technology you're trying to incorporate to see if you can test asymmetries or things like that. If you were to go about trying to plan this return to running progression from the 1080, for example, and like you can look at asymmetry, you can look at like force velocity profiling, things like that. Uh, but with us doing it on the team's call, we won't be able to understand the intricacies of being able to do that actually in person. So I think it's obviously much better to be able to have everybody that's impacting that player be in a certain setting to have those discussions, and then trial and error different things that would come up based off of like the progression that you have listed or exercises you have prescribed. But I think that's probably more important than most.
Yeah, it's not just like a multiple time increase in effectiveness, it's like exponential, you
Yeah.
know? I always
Mhm.
say like networking, if you have a chance to go shake someone's hand, it takes the place of 10 phone calls, you
Yeah.
know? So of course like a Zoom face to face, obviously there's that like kind of nonverbal communication, but even just like to do a drill live in person, you know, or just like
Mhm.
kind of chalk talk back and forth and like try to and do different things.
Yeah.
I think is huge. So yeah, when possible, I think that makes a big difference as well.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess as we kind of talked about this before recording, just drop that in again of being in the minor leagues and also the show.
Mhm.
So of course, like it's like major leaguers never touch their bags, nicer hotels, food, and then there's like the trauma of like minor leaguers eating like PB&J and just like working out like showers with like bands and stuff.
Mhm.
But not only from the training perspective, but also lifestyle, and then players and staff, and then minor league, major league. So we'll put that all together. But any just stories do you have to
Yeah.
kind of compare and contrast having done it all?
I mean, absolutely. The training side of things is probably like one of my favorite comparisons because you're in the big leagues and you have weight rooms at every visiting clubhouse you go to, and then after being in the minor leagues where you're going to like the Podunk Town YMCA where there's like seven locals that are just like sitting around on the bench and you have like a group of 12 players that don't speak English trying to come in and do stuff.
Yeah, it's like this is a weird looking high school team, you know?
Yeah. And then you have the points where you're in like double A, triple A, and you're like working out on concourses at stadiums and doing all these things. But then you get to the big leagues and it's like, wow, like this is the best. Like I don't have to worry about dodging fans walking to their seats 20, 30
Jeez.
minutes for the game because we're finishing up a lift on a concourse. Um, So I mean, like honestly, I think it does though make you a better practitioner because you understand what's important out of your training and out of the stimulus you're trying to create, and not be hindered to an exercise. So like if I'm trying to get like a unilateral row, I don't need a dumbbell necessarily do a unit. I can do like a landmine. I can do what other kind of variation I can find, but whatever I have available is how I can adapt the program to then meet those expectations of that stimulus I'm trying to promote, uh, without kind of being too close-minded to expanding my exercise pool. I have a video of a player doing a chest supported row on like a support beam because we had like no benches or nothing, so we're just doing a support beam chest supported row. So I was like, this is great. Take a
Imagine
picture.
typing that in the program.
So
Concourse
like,
support beam, chest
yeah,
supported row.
it was great. So like from the training side, I mean, I think it's a blessing and a curse because like you kind of this struggle to think of like, wow, I gotta go work at this location again. But then also you get the benefit afterwards of being able to adapt a little bit more willingly. But from the lifestyle things, it's similar, like night and day difference. You go from the Motel Sixes to the 5-star hotels, and uh, you know you get you're around like very well known popular players, and uh, you have to work with obviously those players that are very obviously talented at their sport and at their position, but then also understanding like they also have people that they talk to, and they have to also not compare, but kind of understand where they're coming from outside of their training history, their training background, and even sometimes communicate with their trainers at home or with their external trainers or their PTs or whatever, to kind of get on the same page, same program, so that becomes more holistic in the preparation for that player. So that way like everyone can be on the same page, and we're not, like I said again, understanding what the goal is from everyone's perspective, including the players regime and team that they have away from the field.
Hmm. So
But
one comment, two questions on that. So having spent a majority of my coaching career 3 years on the private side and having a crazy mentor boss who like thrives in chaos, because I can coach anywhere, equipment. I've had 10-year-olds in the rain in a wet field with nothing but cones. And
mm,
I've had like Northwestern has some of the nicest facilities ever, right?
yeah.
But I think it's important how you were talking about like just being a category slash movement based coach,
Mm,
where like even for speed, something even more like fluid and dynamic. It's like, what is the point of today? And then you just mix and match with like the constraints. And it's almost easier because your constraints dictates what you can and can't do versus like having everything, you know? So being
yeah.
like principles or categories based is kind of how I describe it. Um, and then next, do you remember your like I made it moment or like welcome to the show moment when it first hit you after grinding as an intern up to the
Oh,
show
opening day national anthem was freaking goosebumps.
on the field?
Yeah, because we got like all the staff members got called out, all the roster, all the lineup, everybody got called out to the line for the national anthem. And it was the first time I put my hand on my chest. I can literally feel my heart beating through my shirt. I'm like, wow, this is ridiculous. Just because, like, like obviously I didn't make it planned, but I was like, wow, this is still pretty cool to be able to be on the sideline or on the field at an opening day stadium, opening day game, and seeing the fans react the way they do. But that was really cool.
Hearing your name on the loudspeaker, that must have been
I
sick.
I didn't even hear it, to be honest. I just
Just blacked
I
out.
was just like a you know deer in the headlights, just looking around, and then like the guy who's just sending us out to the field grabbed my shirt. It's like, all right, go. It's like, oh,
Just like
no.
casually throwing off the whole thing. Who's this rookie? No, that's the strength coach actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's funny you mentioned that your boy was a D2 walk-on, so
Okay.
going to the show probably wasn't, in my cards. But I've been to more Brewers games than Cubs games because first, Cubs fans are annoying.
I
Second, I call it Miller Park, and Miller Park is way nicer and it's way cheaper.
mm,
It's only like 45 minutes from where I live, anyways, and like on a game day, it's probably the same from, Chicago. And
yeah.
of course, like doing what I do, you can pick out the strength coach, during like pregame. And
Uh-huh.
Josh Seligman, does that name sound familiar?
I don't think so.
He was the Brewers head SNC for like 12 years.
Okay.
So he was on this podcast, and it's like, dude, I've probably seen you and said, "Oh my gosh, I want to do what that guy does." And then he's like on my podcast. Um,
Awesome.
but But no, make it on the field in any way, shape, or form is probably super impressive. So last question on this topic, talking about like lifestyle, what is something that you wish or that the players probably wish that fans knew more about, like how it's not all sunshine and roses, right? And that they are people too, and they have their own challenges and like things like that. So what is something, if you could speak on behalf of players in the show, that they wish fans probably knew?
Oh man, that the players feel their failures more than fans know. And it's tough to see because like you'll see guys going 0 for 4 and they'll spend 3 hours in the cage after the game, and you hear fans just booing them like crazy, and it's like, dude, like this he's literally putting his life and his soul into this game, and like for you just to be, he stinks, go back to
Keyboard
tomorrow.
warriors, you know?
Yeah. And like I obviously I feel like they're probably much more resilient to fan interaction than I am. But like I get frustrated when I hear like home fans, not that there's any really bad home fans, but fans on the road that just wear these guys out. And I'm like, dude, like this is tough. Like if I had people like that yelling at me doing when I
Oh, I'd
was
be
trying to do my
pissed.
job, you know what I mean? It's like how like insecurity becomes like, wow, I thought this was good. And then but it's just so rough because like obviously everything they do in their work, like their job is under a microscope, and their performance and like their reviews and everything that they do, which is just tough because like it's 162 games of that. And it takes up the majority of their life and their preparation, and like they're very devoted to performance and being at the top. So to watch sometimes the things they have to go through with the fans, just it's tough because I wish that they just knew how much time they put in. Like they show up to the field at 11, 12 p.m. and they're there till about 11 o'clock that night, 11:30. So it's not like they show up at 5, take a few swings.
Show and go, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a full day thing, and they play through injuries, they do what they need to do to be at like their best and to perform and play for their team. And uh, I wish they knew that it takes a lot out of them. And I think that if they saw what goes on, then they'd probably have a different perspective of just what everything they go through. But yeah, it's and like it's outside of not even just strength conditioning, like the hitting side, the video analysis, like the scouting they do, like it's incredible the amount of effort and time they put into their craft, and it's pretty incredible.
And then there's just those random D2 walk-ons talking trash on Twitter, you know? Oh, I could totally
Yeah,
do that. That's so easy, you know?
right. That's the other thing is the Twitter.
Oh my
The
gosh, awful.
yeah,
Awful, but I'm sure just like, you know, spending that much time with the guys, like my baseball guys last year, like I'm not old enough to have kids, knock on wood, but like I'm sure they become like your brothers, you know? Just like how much time you spend with them, and then just to see like some random dude just like thinking they know what they talk about. Like I would get tossed for sure.
I know it's tough.
They'd be like, "Hey coach, make your strength coach chill." It's like hold me back, hold me back. Um, so I guess that's a nice segue. Good job, Matt. On the next question, what traits do guys have that get them to the show and keep them there if there's similar things or different things that get them there and or keep them there?
Yes, uh, talent will get them there. Resilience will keep them there. I think obviously, everybody that gets drafted is talented. Everyone that makes it to the big leagues is talented, but whoever gets there obviously overcomes some obstacles to get to the big leagues. But they're just so resilient to failure. Obviously, they understand the fact that baseball is a game of failure, and they don't ever get too down on themselves from their performance. Uh, so their resilience plays a huge factor, but then also their determination of doing the things that they need to on a daily, day in, day out basis. Trusting is a huge part too, is having the trust in not only your support staff, but your teammates of understanding like, hey, like I know this guy, like for example, strength and conditioning, like this is a strength coach. He's supposed to get me here to there. I need to trust that if I do this extra high speed running or whatever, it's going to put me in a position to be more resilient to injury. Um, and then so it's like obviously that not everyone's going to know, not every player's going to know everything about how to get them prepared for the game. So they have to put more stock and more stake into those support staff employees to provide what the information they need. So it takes a lot of trust and resilience and obviously talent to get there, but stay there as well.
Was there anyone in your intern slash low A, high A days that you knew were a little bit different that did end up making to the show?
So I watched the Denton podcast, and Jeremy Pena was definitely the outlier from a lot of people that we worked
So
with.
it was that apparent early on.
Oh my goodness, he was the most explosive individual I've ever been around. And like he lifts a 12-ounce cup to his mouth, he gets a pump in his bicep. He's the most gifted
Good
person.
problem to have.
Oh man, it's incredible. Uh, so like he like outside of like he was still developing like his technical side of everything, but as talk about his physical capacity and capabilities, like it was like wow, like this guy just needs to be able to hit and throw, and he can excel at everything else. It was unreal just to see him at a lower level like that. But yeah, he was definitely an outlier.
Very, very cool.
Mm.
So, last big question, I guess. So, with the change in just training, in the last 1 or 2 years, let alone seven or even kind of 20, as I've been doing it that long, totally. What is one piece of tech or even just style of training? I guess we can do one thing that has become such integrated into what you do, whether it's tech or a cert that you got that you really like or whatever, and then one thing that you think might not be worth the squeeze in your humble opinion, a little overrated.
Yeah, I think the piece of tech, and obviously it's kind of like an easy answer, would just be force plates, just because of versatility reasons. Like you can do upper body, you can do lower body, you can do shoulder, you can do hamstring, you do every kind of assessment you want, and there's research out there to support it. So I mean, obviously, if I were to spend the money on anything, it would be one of those because you get all kinds of different pieces of equipment in the box of one. Um, and then for as far as things that I would discredit, like if not discredit, but just not find use in would be if everything is square and like reliability and validity is consistent amongst all platforms, I would venture it's tough to say anything's not worth the squeeze because just because I haven't found use for it doesn't mean that some other coach in another arena might not find that use elsewhere. Uh, so I mean, I guarantee like a crane scale obviously is one way of measuring isometric strength versus like a force dex. I feel like they're relatively valid in both, but perhaps the cost of one might be more efficient for someone else that can't afford a force dex or something like that. So I think that there's plenty of different um, reasons for different pieces of science and pieces of tech. Uh, but obviously, the validity and reliability is a big construct that needs to be checked in order for it to be valid or to be a piece of equipment I'd look into.
So hats off for the politically correct answer, but I'll politely call BS. So I do agree. I do agree that yes, if it works, if it's valid, all these things. If you had to give a top one, two, or three favorite force plate metrics, and then a one or two like that maybe you hear talked about a lot, but you just haven't seen like it really work its way into your analysis or just yeah, something that you hear a lot, but you just haven't really found as useful for you yet.
Yeah, I think obviously everyone kind of has their own, I guess, favorite metrics. But if I were to look at force plate, some sort of concentric, I guess, peak or like total expression of force value, and then a relative measure of that similar reading, just to get like a relative uh, per body mass or body weight calculation to look at what kind of force expression they have. Um, and then also some sort of uh, uh, fatigue metric like eccentric duration, RSI, um, things like that, to see if we can track some sort of acute fatigue over time, even chronic fatigue over time. But then things that I would look more interested in. This is something that's funny because we actually talked about it today. Was like the IMTP,
Destiny.
the IMTP assessment on the force decks and looking at like peak vertical force, net body weight, and then like peak vertical force relative to body mass as a means of just getting like the underlying capacity of the concentric force expression of athletes. Um, just to kind of understand like, hey, if this person has this much force and then compare it to like their force play jumps, where's their deficit? Is it speed? Is it strength? And then how we can structure a program around those deficits. Like that's where I'm most currently expressing most interest in my research. Uh, just to kind of gauge a better insight as to how we can better execute our programs to understand what deficits they might have.
Hmm. Big force plate guy for sure. I got a little tip about that from Denton, so big shout out to him.
Oh, did it?
If he's listening to this, hats off to you, sir. So
All right, you didn't.
so I guess I kind of lied. Number seven is where can the listeners get more of you? But so six kind of big questions with some
Mhm.
follow-ups. Put you on the spot. I
Yeah.
think that you should definitely be on more podcasts because hats off to you again.
Oh,
Appreciate you kind of going back and forth with me. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for crushing it for the Astros and sharing kind of the life and journey and stories of someone going from intern to the show. So. Thank you again. And where can the listeners get more of Coach Redding?
uh, you know what? If you find me on Instagram, I don't really do much tweeting or Xing, whatever you call it now. But Instagram, you can get my hold of my number. I'll answer text, phone calls, anything. Kind of an open book. So reach out in any way you can.
Fantastic. I'll put your IG in the show notes and everything, and I'll direct all angry tweets at your Twitter for sure.
Keep the Kaiser out of it.
Yeah. If anyone's gonna talk trash about the Houston hitters, put it on Zach for sure.
Yeah, I'll wear all the disgruntled fans. Help me.
Fantastic. So thank you very much again, and I look forward to talking next.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.